cookies.
He could go get a cookie if you'd
No.
like him to.
No, I don't want him to. Because I literally come through the
I will
screen.
make you cookies when you come here. Okay.
Just no caramel popcorn, please.
I cannot believe that I did that to you. That was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Here, fix this together.
I don't think it was your fault. I mean,
Oh, I'm the one who told you to do it.
You're crazy. I'm not going to do that. But I'm like,
Yeah, you should have said you're crazy. I should have known better. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Okay. I still love you.
I'm glad.
So I'm gonna be in Luke. I'm sorry, John chapter 9.
Say that again.
John chapter 9.
Okay, Bubba, do you need to go out again?
And this is it's a long set, so I'm not gonna read through it. What we're gonna do is kind of walk through it real quick. And we're going to be talking about visually challenged people here. I need to be socially sensitive here. So visually challenged.
Are you hinting towards somebody?
No, it's just a blind man. So
No, I mean, we're all visually challenged, well, except maybe Ronnie. I don't know. Do you wear glasses?
Yeah, she does.
Distance, I do.
Okay, well, see, we're all visually challenged. But I don't think any of us are blind.
No, not yet.
This is the recorded thing in the Bible where Jesus heals a man who was born blind. And after he's healed, they call him into the temple to basically all the hierarchy, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they question him about it. They question his parents, and they bring him back and question him, and then they throw him out of the synagogue. Jesus comes and finds him and checks on him. And that's kind of the high spots. What's going on here is, if you read John 8, you find that Jesus has just done a bunch of declarations in the synagogue. And at the very end of John 8, he says, before Abraham was, I am. Basically saying to him, I'm God, which kind of upsets a bunch of people. So they pick up stones to stone him. And it says, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. So in a sort of American context today, he snuck out the side door, probably with his disciples, because they're mentioned in the next verse. And talks about he sneaks out of the temple. And as he's passing by, he saw a blind person who's been blind from birth, and his disciples ask him a question. They ask, Rabbi, who sinned that this man was born blind? Was it his parents? Or was it him? Why was he born blind? So 2 things. When I was in Russia years ago, and I went to a Russian Orthodox church to hand out and donate some Bibles. When I was leaving, the walkway coming out of the Orthodox church, you went down to a fence and then down to a gate, and you left the property of the church. But coming out of service, the sidewalk was lined with beggars. And it seemed, from talking to my translator and stuff, that these were people that were sort of allowed to sit there and beg because they legitimately had a need. That the church had kind of, yes, Joe's got a problem, Pete's got a problem, Sue's got a problem. So, and so they sat there every Sunday, and people would come out of the church and give them alms. So this is the kind of situation you're seeing here, is that Jesus is leaving the temple. He's leaving by a way that people are sitting and begging for alms. And his disciples see somebody there that is blind. but they ask him the question of whose fault is it that he's blind? Who sinned that he's blind? So you kind of have to scratch your head and say, wait a minute, he sees this guy. I mean, his disciples are asking him. So the disciples see this guy. What causes them to ask this question? And if you go down to about verse 8 or 9, after he's healed, it says his neighbors and those who had previously seen him as a beggar were saying, isn't this the same guy that used to sit and beg? And others were saying, well, I think so. And others were saying, well, not sure. He looks like him, kind of thing. And then they were saying, so how did his eyes get to be opened? So if you put those together, what you have is people know this person. He's been blind since birth. He's been sitting there since near birth, and people begging to help him and to help him live. We know he's not young because later in the story, his parents say, hey, he's of age. Quit asking me what happened. Ask him. I wasn't there to a point. So if you think about majority in our sense, it's like 18 or 16. You think about majority in a Jewish community, when you have your bar mitzvah, that's in sort of the 13, 14 range, right? So he's at least a teen, if not a late teen. He's been sitting there for a long time. Everybody knows him. And so when they come out of the temple, as they're walking by this guy, his disciples ask a question that is a standard assumption at that time. But it's not a new concept. It's like, okay, if something's wrong with you, your hand's bad, or your head's bad, or you're blind, or you're deaf, or your leg, you're lame, somebody must have sinned for this to have happened. And so therefore, in quotes, God's mad at you. And either you or your parents, somebody's being punished, and the punishment is the disability. Now think about it. Even today, that comes out. If you go into a church that's got a real prosperity doctrine thing going, quite often you'll hear somebody say, well, you're not a millionaire. Obviously, you must have sin in your life, right? This isn't a new concept, nor is it a concept that has gone away, although we think it is silly. So Jesus' response is, no, it was neither this man nor his parents, but it was so the works of God might be displayed. So you can either take the God's mean approach, which is he was born blind so that when Jesus came around, Jesus could heal him. Or you could take the kindness approach, which is he was born blind, and now that Jesus is coming by, Jesus is going to heal him. And it's going to be a miracle that is, I didn't just heal a blind man who's been blind for a couple of years. I'm healing somebody who's been blind since birth. And that in of itself would have been even a more amazing miracle than healing somebody who has had the disease when they get flies around their eyes and stuff. There's the disease, there's cataracts, there's other things that can go on. Healing, that's kind of one degree of healing, but healing a guy that was born blind, has never seen, you don't know what's wrong with his eyes. Maybe his eyes are just, there's no retina. Maybe there's, something serious that he has never seen. Later when you get down towards verse 32, the blind guy says, since the beginning of time, it has never been heard that anybody has opened the sight of someone born blind. So people have been healed before. Think about it. In Elisha's time, they raised some people from the dead. Naaman the Syrian was healed of leprosy. Other miracles have happened across the Old Testament. But this person saying, it's never been recorded that somebody has healed somebody who was born blind. So this isn't just a casual miracle from the Jews' standpoint. It's a amazing miracle. So Jesus says, well, it wasn't him. It wasn't his parents. It was so we could display the power of God. He spits on the ground, mixes up some clay, pokes it in the guy's eyes, which I'm sure felt wonderful, and tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is not close by. So the guy does that, and he comes back healed. Now, by this time, Jesus has moved on. Remember, people have tried to stone him. He's coming out a side door. So he heals this guy and walks off. The guy goes and washes like he's been told to wash. He comes back, he can see. He's coming back to the same place he was when he was begging. So everybody who knows him, everybody who's used to see him is coming out of the temple, is like, holy mackerel, this is really something. You've been healed. How did that happen? And so he says, well, the man named Jesus made some clay, stuck it in my eyes, told me to go wash. I did, and I can see. And everybody says, oh, isn't that nice? Everybody says, where is he? And the guy's like, I have no idea. He healed me and walked off. Guess what? Guess what? I don't know what he looks like because I was blind. So you've got this miracle. You've got Jesus sort of coming out the side door. He heals him on the Sabbath, it says farther down in the thing. So he's hacking people off here. Number one, he was in the church, hacked him off with what he said, came out the side door, heals this guy on the Sabbath. He now can see when he couldn't see. And so now pretty much everybody's upset except Jesus' disciples and the man who can see and his parents. I mean, pretty straightforward. And so they call the guy in and they start questioning him in, how did it happen? What did it happen? Who did it? On what day? On what time? Can you tell me about it? Da, 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 da. And he keeps, saying to him, I've told you what's going on. Jesus came by, clay, dirt, eye, wash, come back, see. What is there about this that you guys just don't get? And they come back and say, well, we know this guy is a sinner. We don't understand how he does this stuff. And the blind man's like, dudes, I couldn't see. I can see. It was bad. It's good. What is it that you don't get about this? And they keep going on. And he says, and so they ask him, what do you think about this guy that healed you? And he goes, well, he's a prophet, obviously, because nobody else does these things. And they said, well, if you think about it, they're going, well, I can't really say he's a prophet. Right? It's sort of like the question about John the Baptist. Who did you see? Was he a prophet or not? They're like, nuts. If I say he was a prophet, they say, why didn't you believe in him? If I say he's not a prophet, everybody gets upset. So my answer is, I don't know. Right? Except this guy's healing on the Sabbath. He's saying bad things. He must be a sinner. I have no idea what he's doing, and we don't like it. And the fact that they can't rejoice with the blind guy, from my perspective, is absolutely hilarious. It's like, excuse me? Pardon me? And so they take the guy and they call in his parents. Well, we'll get the straight scoop from his parents. And his parents are like, well, that's my son. He was born blind. He now can see. I wasn't really there when it happened. I'm down and around the early 20s. And they say this because they're afraid if I say, well, Jesus did it and I think he's wonderful and he's the Messiah, they're going to get tossed out of the synagogue. And remember, being in the synagogue is sort of everything for the Jews, right? You're included. Well, if you get tossed out of the synagogue, nobody's going to talk to you anymore. None of your neighbors are going to talk to you. You may not be able to buy. You may have trouble selling. The whole world becomes very difficult. And so they basically say, yes, yeah, probably can't offer sacrifices. The whole schmear kind of falls apart for you. So they go, well, it is my son. He was blind. He's not now. Why don't you ask him? He's old enough. Now, you can blame the parents and say,
I want to blame the parents.
Mary Kay says, stand up for your son. And I'm like, well, okay, let's not be too harsh on the parents. No.
I think they're throwing their kid under the bus.
Yeah, me too.
And that's one way to look at. The other way is he's old enough and they weren't there when it happened. And they kind of lose almost everything if they kind of jump up to the Jesus is the Son of God. They just saw, they've seen him come out of the temple. Maybe they were even there. They see the people picking up stones to stone him. Sounds like bad company to be in right now. So I asked my son. So they bring the son back in. Mom, Mary Kay doesn't like this part. She wants to preach a different part.
Yeah.
So they call the son back in and say, tell us again, basically. And he's like, I already told you, blind, dirt, wash, see. Come on, guys. How hard is this to figure out? And they say, what did you do to you? He did, how did he open up your eyes? In verse, I'm down verse 26. And he's like, I told you, you're not listening. And basically, they then accuse him of being a disciple. He goes, I don't even know who this guy is.
Mhm.
I was blind. I couldn't see him. I'm not sure how he is. I just know his name's Jesus. And the man said, here's an amazing thing. You don't know yet where he's from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't hear sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, God hears him. Since the beginning of time, it's never been heard that anybody has been healed that was born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't do anything. And they said, well, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. You were born entirely in sins. Why are you trying to teach us? Now think about it. Go back to the beginning. They're still in this part of somebody sinned, therefore you're blind. And Jesus basically says way up front, that's not how the system works. People that have a deformity, or the man with the withered hand, you got a lame person, you got a blind person, you got a person who's sick, you got a leprous person. This isn't you sinned one day and God zapped you. Really, this happens to us and God wants to heal us. It's not God's meanness that draws people to God. It's the kindness of God that draws people to repentance. God's not a mean God. If you think about it, if you look at the 99 names of God that is in an Arabic script in a square where they do the 99 names of God, there's lots of names in there, just like we have Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha, right? God's a healer, God's a provider. We have all these. They have a whole bunch too. None of them are God is a God of kindness or God is love. Those aren't in the 99 names. Now, there's some that we use too. He is King of Kings. Melech Maluk, that's one of the 99 names of God. Lord of Lords, that's another one of them in there. The Almighty, that's in there. But God is love or God is kind isn't in there. What Jesus is saying here is, no. God is kind. And so they finally tossed this kid out of the synagogue. And so he's being outcast because he's been healed. I don't think he's probably upset about being tossed out, but he's not upset about being healed here. His whole witness has been, guys, whatever, you can say what you want, but sinners don't do miracles like this. Only people that come from God. Nobody's ever experienced this kind of miracle. I'm okay with this whole thing. If y'all can't figure it out, that's your problem, basically. And they say to him, why are you trying to teach us? And if you think about that, they're looking at somebody sinned, therefore you were blind. Jesus just said things we don't like. He obviously is not somebody we like, and yet he did this miracle. But we can't jump from, wow, this is a cool miracle, to maybe he's not so bad after all. We can't make that jump. We are stuck on, you're a sinner, you were blind, we don't like Jesus. And we're stuck there. So the next thing that happens is then very interesting. Jesus comes back, finds out down in verse 35, Jesus hears that they threw him out of the temple, and he comes back and finds the guy. He says, "You believe in the Son of Man?" And he looks at him because he can see him now and says, "Well, who is he that I might believe in him?" And Jesus says basically, "Well, me." He uses fancier language, but it's me. Okay, I did it. And the guy said, "Lord, I believe." And Jesus says, "For judgment I came into the world, so those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Now, there's a song back from the 70s. I'm going to pull up the words so I don't miss this.
Oh, I thought you were going to sing it. Are you going to sing it?
I probably could. I'm not sure you'd like it, but it's a song from the 70s when hippies were writing songs. And it starts out with, all the children of the world, red, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. And then the title that everybody knows the song by is, everything is beautiful in its own way, like a starry summer night or a snow-covered winter's day. And he goes on, but one of the verses is, there is none so blind as he who will not see. We must not close our minds. We must let our hearts be free. Thoughts be free. So there's none so blind as he who will not see. Not that he can't see, but he won't see. That things are changing. The perspective is different. You need to be able to see. So the next thing that happens is Jesus says to the blind guy, I came so that those who don't see can see, and that those who can see become blind. And there were Pharisees with him at that when he came back. And they said, we're not blind too, are we? What do you think the answer to that question is? Right? The answer is, well, no, you know what, Sherlock? Jesus said to him, well, if you're blind, you wouldn't have sin. But since you say we can see, your sin remains. So Jesus is basically saying, there's none so blind as he who will not see. So in this whole thing about healing the blind guy, you've got this amazing miracle that not only the individual, but his parents and the community are all attesting to, holy mackerel, this guy was blind from birth, he's been healed, holy mackerel. And all the Pharisees can see is, yeah, that's fine. But we don't like Jesus, and we don't like what he's doing. We don't like what he said in the temple. We don't like him healing on the Sabbath. So there's got to be something wrong with this picture. Yes, yeah. You can see now, big deal. But we don't like the fact that you can see, because we don't like Jesus and we don't like what he's doing. And so we can't cross that line from, wow, that's amazing, from where we are, because our rules say this isn't good. Jesus isn't good. Healing on the Sabbath isn't good. What he said in the temple isn't good. All this rabble rousing he's doing isn't good. All this changing the laws and working his way around the law. All of this is no good. So I'm glad you can see, dude, but I'm going to throw you out of the temple, because we can't have you walking around here. Because if you're walking around here and you're healed and everybody knows this, this does not help my preaching style at all. You are totally and completely out of order. So we can't do anything with this. So the only thing we got left is we toss you out so nobody can see you, and we go on about our business. And when Jesus comes back to talk to him, the Pharisee says, I'm not blind, am I? What are you talking about? And Jesus goes, well, no, duh. You can't figure this out. And the other place, and I'm almost done. The other place that this comes up, and we'll talk about it later, is when he raises Lazarus from the dead. The conversation the Pharisees and the Sadducees has is, this is getting out of hand. He did this too close to Jerusalem. Almost, we need to kill Lazarus and him, because too many people saw what happened, and too many people are going, wow, that's neat. And we can't have this.
This seems like it's a threat to the natural order, or the legal order of things.
Yeah.
The status quo.
Yes. Thank you.
So that, you know, they're threatened,
Yeah.
because all of a sudden they're not going to be the authority necessarily.
Right.
It's just like,
Amazing to me that this guy, he puts mud in his eyes and tells him to go wash, and he isn't healed yet. It's as he, you know, goes to wash in the pool of Siloam, I think, that he ends up with his healing. But he goes and he obeys and he does this, you know.
He does have dirt in his eyes.
Yeah, well, yeah. But if you can't see, I don't know, can you feel it? I don't know.
Yes, I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I would think so.
I'm just surprised that that's how Jesus did it, that he just didn't do the healing right then and there in front of everybody. So it's almost a catch-22, because if he did, he would have more followers. You know, it'd be more dramatic if everybody saw it, which would have been worse for the leaders of the church. So I just think that's interesting. And then the one question I had is, when you're kicked out of the synagogue, are you kicked out of the community, or are you just kicked out of the building? Do you know?
You kind of become persona non grata. So you end up being like a Gentile living in town, because remember, most of these towns were mixed. They had Jews and Gentiles. They didn't kill all the Canaanites and the Jebusites and the other Zites and the Zites and those Zites. You know, they didn't kill them all when they came into the promised land. So these were mostly mixed communities, and sort of like India to a point with Kasum is, you ended up with classes of people. And, you know, what you couldn't do, where you could and couldn't go.
But he wouldn't be any worse off than he was when he was blind, right? Or would he?
This says that in the Jewish community, you would have been excommunicated, and it was a severe punishment. You were excluded from relationships with the people, even within your own family for the space of 30 days. You're not allowed to approach a Jew from a distance nearer than 4 cubits. If you didn't give any signs of penitence, your time could be doubled or tripled. You missed all sacred meetings. There were dreadful curses. You basically were, put out of your community, and that would have been really, really difficult. Because then you can't make sacrifices for your sins and you can't atone. And their whole system is based on doing that.
But it also requires the community to go along with it. Right?
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, because obviously he was known in the community, right? And they know that a healing took place. And it was awesome because he'd been blind since birth. So it's interesting. I want the chapter, what is it, 9b? Know what?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This also says, if you were kicked out of the synagogue, you forfeited your Jewish exemption from emperor worship. And therefore you're liable to the death penalty if you refuse to worship.
If you refuse what?
To worship the emperor, because Jews were given a exemption for having to worship the emperor. So if you're kicked out of the synagogue, you lose that exemption, and now you've got to worship the emperor. Well, if you're a Jew, you don't want to worship the emperor.
But it all requires the community to go along with, and Joe threw me out of the church. Right? So depending on how all of that went down, but at least in this section of scripture, he seems to be glad to trade his sight
For all that.
for the fact that the Pharisees are mad at Jesus.
And the
Anybody
consequences.
Correct.
Anybody watch The Chosen season 3 so far?
No, I haven't.
One of the scenes, they have Jesus in the synagogue in Nazareth, where he reads from the scroll of Isaiah and says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, and basically stands up and says, I'm the Messiah. But one of the things they did in that episode as they were filming it was they had his mother in the synagogue as well that day, which assumedly she would have been. And then her watching all of the people in the synagogue being angry at Jesus and then taking him out and trying to throw him off a cliff and stuff. But it just made it very real to me that she would have been there and she would have actually been watching this and experiencing this. And I don't think I'd ever thought about that before. It was really interesting.
Chosen.
Was
Hey,
fun.
Pam's back.
Pam's back. The other thing
Yes,
was
I've been listening the whole time. And yes, I watched Chosen. Sorry, I just
Okay.
got home.
Okay, good.
the other thing that was fun this week was he heals a person. So 2 people come to him, both needing healing, but one of them insists the other person is more needy than he is, and he says, please heal my friend. And just the way they do some of their stuff, I find it fun. So he heals the lady, and he heals her from blindness so she can see. And then he says to the guy, sort of, thanks for bringing her, you're a friend, we'll get together later, don't worry about it, you need to walk her home, puts his hand on his shoulder, pats him on the shoulder.
And the guy's lame.
And the guy's lame, he can't walk, or he can't walk
limps.
well.
He limps.
And he's like, thank you, that's why I brought her, she was more needy than I was, fantastic, I'm not mad, this is great. He starts to walk off, and Jesus looks at his disciples and goes, just hold on a second. And they're like, what? At which point the guy that's walking off goes, wait a minute, I'm not late. Oh, hey, wait, my leg, it's fixed. Oh, what? But just Jesus sort of going, just hold on a second.
We're not done here yet.
Wait for it.
We're not done yet.
It's, it's showing from my perspective, the concern as well as the humanness of Christ. of caring for people. I mean, he cared enough for this blind guy.
I love, you know, my favorite part of that.
Say again, we lost you.
Say it again.
Rose.
Pam is frozen.
But I don't know. I don't know if you can hear me.
Now,
Yes.
no, yes.
That better. Now I cannot.
No, you're breaking up.
Sorry, I don't know why. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh no. Bob, I was gonna say my favorite part of that scene was at the very end when he goes, "That was fun." I love that. That was my favorite part. He's like, "That was fun." And Simon goes, "Yeah." You know.
And the joy he must have felt every single time he was able to, you know, minister to somebody and bring them healing of whatever it was, the compassion that he had, and then contrast that with the Pharisees who don't seem to have any compassion. It's just you're breaking rules and we don't like this and you're messing things up and, you know. Amazing. Not necessarily.
I didn't know that you could see The Chosen. I'd never heard of it before. So it's on Netflix.
And it's
No,
free.
not Netflix. There are two films called The Chosen. One of them is, I don't know what it is. It's a TV series. The other one is it's going to be 7 seasons of Jesus's life. And it's on either YouTube or there's an app called The Chosen app and it's free to download. And then you can watch all of it. Angel app.
Oh, I was seeing that, but it says that it shows the historical drama. Oh, it says 2 seasons. That's not it.
Well,
Well, there's 3 seasons, but some of the streaming companies, like you can actually stream it, will have only 1 or 2 seasons.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah. Cool. I see the YouTube. Oh.
Please
I'll
find.
find- It sounds awesome.
Start at number 1. It does start in the beginning. The first one's kind of, but after that, they're pretty good.
Okay, cool.
But I can't hear you, Robin. You're on mute.
well, heal your muteness.
Do you want me to stop recording?
That's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
You know, I was just reading back, because I have